Hello, I'm Sheila Hobden. I'm a coach and I work predominantly with doctors to ensure that they take their own well-being as seriously as their patients. And I'm going to talk today about the topic of well-being. I'm going to start off with a definition, and my best definition is to flip it around and talk about being well. So is everything, not just our physical health, but our mental health, how we think about things, how we see the world, how we feel about things. And it's about feeling good about all of those things. One element is actually self-belief, self-determination. So that's around a belief that we can actually influence what happens in our lives. So I talk a lot about cars and how actually if we look after ourselves as well as we looked after our cars, we'd actually be in for a smoother ride. So let's take some of those car parts. One of them is the steering wheel. So when you see someone get into a car, they have the choice to turn left or to turn right. Or imagine you're on your bike, you get that choice to turn left or right. If you see a hazard in front of you, you'll probably turn one way or another to get out of its way. One of those choices you might not really like. It might put you in a ditch, but it's still a choice. So actually being able to see that we have got a choice makes quite a difference on how much control we feel that we've got. Next is the engine. Have you ever got into a car with maybe mum or dad or someone caring for you driving? And have you ever heard when the car starts up, the engine starts saying things like, don't really feel like this today, or can't really be bothered, or oh, I'm not really any good at this, I don't think I should. Well, I certainly haven't, and I'd be surprised if anyone has heard an engine say those things. And the reason is because they're just thoughts and they're not real. And the problem starts when we get those thoughts in our minds and we start fusing with those thoughts and believing that they're true. So if we can be a bit more engine-like, and I like to think of it as taking a pair of scissors to those thoughts and cutting away from them, we're going to take that strength from inside ourselves. So that's what I'm talking about with self-belief and self-determination. Now, that's all good and well until something changes, because when things change and we haven't chosen to change them, it becomes a little bit more difficult. So I'm going to share a graph with you. And this graph shows our mood and how long it takes for things to happen. So if we look at the left-hand side, that's our mood rising and dropping, and then there's time across the bottom. So when we first hear about something that's changed, let's take the example, we're expecting our exam results, and they're not quite what we expected. So we initially have a dip in mood because there's a shock there. Then we start to think, well, actually, if I ignore this for a little bit, it might go away. So we deny it and have a boost of a mood. Then realize, actually, it's not going to go away by just thinking like that. So we get a bit frustrated and we have to get our heads around the fact that this is the situation and I will need to move on. So that's the acceptance part at the bottom. And we don't feel great about that because we don't really want that to be true. But once we get our heads around it and start to make sense of it, we can start to experiment and think, right, what are my options? So get your steering wheel out again and start thinking, what can I experiment with? Then, as a result of those experiments, we learn. And when we learn, we can then start to apply that and integrate it into our day-to-day. And that's how we can actually end up in a better mood than we did before. And I wanted to share this graph because it helps normalize it and realize that actually everybody goes through this process. And the reason we've got time at the bottom is that everybody will take different periods of time to move through that change process. So moving on, we've got our heads around the results. We've started to think about what we're doing. And actually, maybe it's coming towards the end of the summer holidays and we're starting to think about maybe getting back into some learning. Now, I'm sure all of us would like to have those summer holidays carry on forever and ever. But actually, as humans, need something to kind of challenge us and push us. So I'm going to share another graph with you now. And this is the pressure performance graph. But I like to see pressure as demands. So what we're saying on this graph is the more demand that's placed on us, the better we'll perform. But it's only to a certain point. And if we imagine that this is a hill that we're climbing up, And we're okay on that sort of smoothish plateau where we're in our comfort zone, not having to push too hard. There's a little bit of stretch there. That's where we're learning new things. But when we get to the top, actually what we didn't realise was there's a bit of a cliff the other side. And we're at risk if we put ourselves under too much demand that we won't be able to perform at all and we drop off. And sometimes that gets called burnout. But I'm interested in the other end of the curve, the very part where we really haven't got much pressure or much demand. And you can see there, it says boredom. So actually, when we're not pushing against things, when we're not learning or achieving things, we actually can't really be bothered anymore. And so the longer that goes on, we are in danger of kind of rusting out. So if the car gets left in the garage, it'll rust out and it won't work anymore. So that's just a little bit around how we can think about what we need. And the final part I wanted to think about was how we can frame things positively. So think about the framework of the car or the frame of your bike. The more you polish it, the more it shines. So the more we develop our positivity muscle, the better. And we can look at this from, we don't need to be going around smiling all the time, always happy. That's actually not realistic. But having an optimistic mindset and believing we will get through this, that's when actually we can really get some results. So think about it like this. In any given scenario, what actually is the worst possible thing that could happen? So imagine you're thinking about your exam results. What is the worst situation that could come up? And then think about what's the absolute best situation that you really would like. And then work somewhere in the middle. And the benefit of this is we have this realistic optimism about what's most likely to happen. But having thought through and prepared for what might happen, our brains are ready. So if something does happen that we're not expecting, we've thought through that and we've considered it. So that's really what I've got to share for you today. And thank you so much for watching. There's me, and thank you very much. I'm very happy to have been able to share some wisdom with you, and I wish you all the very best for continuing for the rest of the summer and into whatever it is you go to do next. Goodbye.